Hello, everyone, and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Jyoti Prakash, healthcare analyst here at Edison. We're delighted to be joined again by Sten Sörensen, the CEO of Cereno Scientific, a company harnessing the properties of HDAC inhibition to develop disease modifying treatments for rare conditions. He joins us today to discuss the company's full year 2025 results and the key clinical and strategic developments shaping its cardiopulmonary pipeline. Welcome, Sten.
Thank you, Judy.
So, Sten, let's start off with your 2025 results. Can you summarize some of the key takeaways and what stands out the most for you from the results?
Sure. I think the Phase IIa data that we presented almost a year ago, I think, really showed us that we have hope to have impact on these patients, pulmonary arterial hypertension, with a disease-modifying action. Our objective is to slow down, halt, and possibly reverse this fatal disease. The results we saw had impact on prognostic factors, on the class of New York Heart Association. We moved patients back to a lighter disease state. And we also had an impact on the contractility of the right heart, so the function of the heart. We had other types of data, such as reduction of pulmonary pressure as measured with the CardioMEMS or wireless technology. And in addition, we impacted the quality of life as measured by a couple of technologies, so Minnesota Heart Failure Program or the SYMPACT in PH questionnaire. So there was an article coming out published by FDA and CVCT that highlighted what you would need to do if you have the objective of having a disease-modifying agent for these patients. It was published in Lancet Respiratory in around February, March, I think, last year. And we believe we had foresight enough to design our Phase IIa to measure these various objectives that this publication highlighted that you should aim for, and not least the quality of life of these patients as a very important part, but also the prognostic factor of these patients, so which have an average survival time of about 7.5 years on diagnosis. And we achieved these results with only 3 months therapy of our drug on top of standard of care. So we're hopeful that we will be able to now, in our new study, Phase IIb trial, be able to document more in that direction. So that was a key highlight of the year. In addition, we got then positive feedback from FDA in a Type C meeting, and then later fast track designation in September by FDA. So basically well aligned with the regulatory authority in the hope that we will do something really good for these patients and work with them to bring this drug as well and as fast as possible to the patients. We later in the year got our Phase IIb trial accepted by FDA. So we will now pursue the regulatory authorities in other countries where we will pursue the trial. But so all in all, for our lead program, CS1, which is a repurposed VPA drug into this disease with a specific formulation and ODD designation both in the US and in Europe, that program went really well, we believe, last year. We also signed up, partnered with a top CRO to pursue the trial. So we feel we are in good shape with this program, and that was the main highlight of last year. We have 2 HDAC inhibitor programs because we believe that this mode of action can be applied to a multitude of cardiovascular and pulmonary indications. And we as a biotech are pursuing two rare indications with our two programs. And the second program, which is a new chemical entity, CS014, we completed our phase I trial and we got positive data on safety and tolerance in that trial. And not less interesting is that we got the drug exposure in humans that we have seen to be effective as a disease-modifying agent in preclinical work. So that was very good, and we are now pursuing this drug. We changed our target indication to PH-ILD, and the reason is that is better fit for the drug and for us as a company as initial target indication. So all in all, these two programs moved well forward. I think that's the highlight. Another aspect of last year was that we did a refinancing that we completed on the 27th of November, covering a total of 665 million Swedish kronor if fully exercised. So containing 350 million in convertible loans, two parts, and then 100 million in an equity raise at premium, and then two couple of warrant packages that can be fully exercised on certain parameters. So all in all, the financial move last year was also a good one for Cereno. So that, I think, completes the major points, unless I've forgotten something specific here.
Excellent. And you'd mentioned HDAC inhibition. Both your core assets, CS1 and CS014, are HDAC inhibitors. For those new to Cereno, can you walk us through how HDAC inhibition and epigenetic modulation work, and why this approach makes sense in cardiopulmonary conditions?
Yes, HDAC inhibition is an epigenetic modulator. So it's basically unlocking the DNA's ability to produce proteins the way it's supposed to do. And in certain diseases, and also in relation to how you live your life, your DNA can be locked up so it doesn't function properly. And that's epigenetic impact, if you will, in general. With HDAC inhibition, we are able to unlock this blockade that there are around the carbohydrates, the histones. And so what does this really mean? Well, if you have an HDAC inhibitor, you can impact a number of signal pathways that have a deleterious impact on the cardiopulmonary vessels and organs. And if you look at pulmonary arterial hypertension, you have components such as inflammation, connective tissue or fibrosis development. You have myocyte, uncontrolled myocyte growth in the endothelial cell wall, and you get eventually high pulmonary pressure, which causes hypertrophy of the right heart, which eventually fails. And you also have microthrombotic events in these patients. So this is what's causing this short life expectancy upon diagnosis, and also deteriorating quality of life. Now, what you'd like to do if you want to impact this disease more than just reducing pressure, which is more of a symptomatic approach, it's been very helpful with vasodilators, which is the dominant class in this indication. So you have, with those drugs, been able to extend the life expectancy from around 2.5 to 7.5 years. But then it ends. So you cannot do more with the vasodilation. So the pathological process in these patients continue with or without the vasodilation. So what you'd like to do is impact these in various processes that are negative. And this is exactly what we've been able, and others, to document with HDAC inhibition, and specifically with VPA, which is our molecule that we have in CS1. So it is an anti-inflammatory and anti-fibrotic. It has a slowing down of remodeling of myocyte growth. it reduces pulmonary pressure, and in addition, it is able to impact and prevent thrombotic episodes. This is all documented and published information. So when we decided to select an indication, we chose PH as the most promising one to start with for Cereno, and hopefully then to have a very valuable impact for these patients. So, and this is what you'd like to achieve, is you'd like to slow down these processes, halt them, and maybe reverse this pathological process. And this is exactly what has been documented in preclinical work, both prevention and reversal of vessel and cardiac pathology. So we are very hopeful, and we think that what we saw in the Phase IIa trial was indications of these characteristics that this mode has. If you compare this mode of action to other new agents, such as, for instance, sotatercept, which is a monoclonal antibody, a TGF-beta trap molecule, it's a much more narrow approach. So it operates around TGF-beta. HDAC inhibition has an impact more upstream and on multitude of pathways. And we believe that that is a more holistic approach in these patients and should be more effective when it comes to disease modification. So that is, this is also why we believe that we should pursue more than one indication. We believe we have a repeatable biology here in a small molecule that's very safe and well tolerated. It's been in man for 50, 60 years, VPA, for other diseases in much higher dosages. So we believe we can apply this mode of action to other diseases, and that's exactly why we pursued a new chemical entity as a second generation HDAC inhibitor, and that's CS014. And there are several proof of concept studies published in around 600 articles of VPA, and other publications of proof of concept efficacy beyond PH is in IPF, so in lung fibrosis. There's also in liver fibrosis, kidney fibrosis, and in myocardial infarction, etc. So we chose to pursue a second indication that's more into the lung tissue pathological processes, so lung fibrosis, and we chose PH-ILD, pulmonary hypertension, interstitial lung disease. So that's the target for CS014.
Right. And just talking about your primary asset, CS1, it's about to commence Phase IIb studies, and the Phase IIb design is quite different from what we've historically seen in PAH. What was the strategic rationale behind the longer duration and the endpoints which has been chosen for the study?
Well, first, maybe I should say that the investigators and patients didn't really want to stop the Phase IIa trial treatment. So we were asked to submit a protocol to FDA and ask for extended access program. And we got that accepted immediately by FDA. So we have run a 1 year extended access program for 10 patients that were about half of the patients in the Phase IIa trial into this longer program, which primarily has as an objective to look at safety and tolerance over the longer term. We, of course, are interested to see if each individual patient journey here is a good one rather than a negative one. So we will see. It's a very small material, but in any case, it's a longer period with our drug in patients. That data, top-line analysis will come out in Q1 and more analysis in Q2. So we're excited about that. We're also looking at potential impact on structure with a specific CT scan technology. So that's been going on last year. And we've had the last patient last visit, so analysis are ongoing. When it comes to the design of the Phase IIb trial, we have, of course, taken notice of the FDA's and the experts' publication and also view on what should be pursued in new trials in this indication. And if you especially are interested in disease modification. So we have constructed the design that way. And for a disease modifying agent that is not primarily a dilating agent, but expects to have impact on the pathological processes, it's beneficial to have a longer period when you study this drug on top of standard of care. And that's exactly what we have done. So we have 36 weeks in the first therapeutic window, so to speak, on top of standard of care. And then we swap the patients from placebo to active therapy, and then we continue the trial unto 60 weeks. And there is a smaller window where they are not on drug. And the reason for this design is that the longer period, but it's also for patients in this trial all of the patients to get active drug. There's also a possibility to see if the drug therapy has a lingering effect, which it hopefully should have after these 36 weeks. And that would highlight, to some extent, the disease-modifying capacity of the drug.
Right. And if you just look at the competitive landscape, there has been some important news flow in the space recently, including the seralutinib phase 3 trial outcome. How do you interpret the implication of the results on the PH field, and what kind of read across do you see for CS1?
Well, I think first and foremost, we are in this business to help patients, and we are passionate about it. So we'd love drugs to succeed in their, vision and ambition to help these patients. So it's always negative when a drug program fails to prove what it's aimed to do. We think. I've been in the heart failure space most of my life and been able to add therapy to standard of care and improve survival with 30% plus in 2 previous journeys with beta blockers and MR antagonists. And at that time, there were a couple of agents. Now there are 7. So if you have a deadly disease with a really bad prognosis and pathological deterioration, there is room for a multitude of therapies to help these patients, and probably also needed. So in heart failure, traditional heart failure, that was the case. And we believe that PH is research on PH, probably due to this orphan nature, is 30 years behind the heart failure research. And we are one of the movers here. When it comes specifically to the field, until a couple of years ago, it was purely vasodilating mode of action drugs. And then sotatercept, TGF-beta that we talked about before here, came as a new agent. It's always difficult with new agents because you don't know if they're going to be safe, well tolerated, and effective. And in the case of TGF-beta, it has its drawbacks when it comes to safety on bleedings and also pericardiac effusion and also on tolerance. But it's effective at least up to 6 months. Whether or not it's a disease-modifying agent, I think has to still be documented and proven. This is a very narrow approach. With seralutinib failing in phase 3 was one of the newer mode of actions that it didn't seem to be effective enough in that trial. So we'll see if that program will continue or stop completely. We also saw last year Keros Therapeutics wanting to pursue a second generation, if you will, after sotatercept with a better profile than when it comes to safety and tolerance than sotatercept or Winrevair, but failed in Phase IIb due to exactly pericardiac effusion, which is very dangerous. So I'm a bit surprised actually that GSK are going for the same axis. I think it's if they're able to be safer and more tolerant, that is a great thing, I think. But the jury will be out on that one, on the B35 acquisition that was made last week, I think. So this leaves the field quite open for a once daily, very safe and well tolerated in man in much higher dosages. And so far, very well and safe, tolerated and safe in the PH trial we have pursued so far. And we are pursuing it in much lower dosages than has been in man for these 60 years. So a once daily, safe, well tolerated drug, if it's now effective and a disease modifying agent, it would be able to add to all the other standard of care drugs, including Winrevair. And I think it would be a preferred choice eventually to be added very early after diagnosis to get the full impact of the disease modifying capacity.
So, Sten, turning to your second asset, CS014, you recently broadened the clinical focus towards PH-ILD, and you touched on this a bit. But what drove this decision, and what should investors look for as the next key milestone from this program?
Well, we believe that we already have very strong signals in pH. With our CS1 drug in Phase IIa and in preclinical work. And in addition, with CS014, we had impact on plexiform lesions and fibrosis in a pH model. So we have a good standing, we believe, with our drug. And remembering that CS014 is a deuterized version of VPA, so new generation and improved molecule. We felt that the hurdle in IPF is quite high for new agents. A lot of agents have failed. The programs are very long and large. And we felt that PH-ILD, there's even higher unmet need when it comes to agents. So from a scientific platform point of view, we believe that PH-ILD is closer to the data we have, and that the hurdle in terms of time and cost is lower and the need is higher. So these three components play for PH-ILD for our agent as the first indication. That doesn't preclude IPF as we move forward later with this drug in expansion of indications, of course. We are now pursuing our documentation work, if you will, the paperwork, and eventually discussions with regulatory authorities and experts around the world to bring forward a Phase II program to FDA and other regulatory authorities for the program for CS014 in PH-ILD. And we expect to have that submitted and accepted by the end of this year and start a Phase II program next year.
Excellent. And Sten, during the CMD, which was recently concluded, you mentioned that partnering discussions are ongoing. Where are you in that process now, and what would be an ideal partnership look like for Cereno?
So we have been exposing, so to speak, telling the world and potential partners around the world, both global players, specialty players into the orphan disease or PH specifically, as well as local or regional players in, for instance, Japan, Asia, etc., about Cereno and what we're doing, and what we're doing is a pioneering effort with this new mode of action. So these discussions are with some partners closed, and with other partners they're still ongoing, and they're shifting compared to what stage we are with the company. And as we're moving forward, discussions continue or change direction. So I would say that we are in an exciting phase now. A lot of things, as you heard before, are happening in the PH field with the drugs that are there. We saw an acquisition of B35 last week by GSK. A drug program failed in phase 2 last year and in phase 3 this year. So two mode of actions that didn't really come out well in the trials. And so there is a strong need and a strong appetite, we believe, for drugs that can make a difference. And we sense that in our discussions, and that's where we are, basically. And it's a changing field. So I said on the Capital Markets Day that I think that we will do some kind of deal this year between Cereno and a partner. But let's see, the jury is still out on that. I think we have very good discussions.
That's excellent, Stan. And it seems like a lot is going on with the company, and we look forward to the progress over the coming periods. But as we look ahead, can you quickly summarize the most important upcoming milestones for Cereno, which would be of greatest interest to investors?
So the first milestone that's coming up is actually some readout of the extended access program for our lead program CS1 in PH. So we'll get some information out in this quarter and some more information in Q2. That's the first information and milestone. I think it's going to be really interesting. The second milestone of very high importance is the first recruitment into our Phase IIb trial, which we expect to happen in Q2, towards the end of Q2, I would say. And then that program is rolling. And we remember we are going to run this program on 3 continents, so US, Europe, and South America. So it's a 65 sites program with around 125 patients around the world. So there will be several milestones as this program progresses over the year that we will be able to report on. So those are the two major milestones this year. And then, of course, the submission and acceptance by regulatory authorities of the Phase 2 program for CS014. Those are the key things this year. And of course, I hope to be able to report something in relation to partners.
Thank you, Stan, for your time and for sharing these insights into Cereno's strategy and upcoming catalysts. For our audience keen to learn more about Cereno Scientific, please refer to edisongroup.com for our ongoing coverage of the company. Thank you again, Stan.